G'day guys, Scotty here from the Oak Barrel, just with a little quick update with something we've got in store because I've had a few questions over the phone and via email about what this is. We've just had land in store a few of these Japanese whiskey tasting sets. Now, they were meant to arrive just before Christmas. Didn't quite get there, about 3 months late, but we're going to have a little bit of fun with them anyway because we've organised with these sets to have a bit of a virtual tasting coming up on the 13th of April, which is going to be really cool. Go over about an hour of the history of Japanese whiskey and specifically pertaining to these whiskies, but then also from the broader picture of where Japanese whiskey is now, how it got there, and importantly, where it's going to go next. So the five whiskies we've got in the pack, and these have come from our friends of Drinks by the Dram in the UK. So there's certain whiskies in here that we don't always see in Australia because they were packaged over there. And so five whiskies, all 30 mils. The first one we're going to go through, and we're obviously going to go into a little bit more depth, but just to give you an overview of what's going to happen, we've got the Super Nikka, which is quite a historic blend. They've been releasing it in Japan for a few decades now. You see it quite rarely in Australia, and it was designed to be almost like an introduction to whiskey. It's got a bit of sherry, it's got a bit of peat, it's got like a rich malty sort of drive to it, and I think that's really interesting for whiskies that were prominent in the 60s, 70s and 80s to kind of figure out what the drinking habits were back then and how Japanese whiskey was trying to bring people to whiskey from other categories as well. Then we're going to go into probably the Mars Maltage Cosmo. Now, this is a really interesting one. So this is a bit of a world blend that comes from the Mars distillery. They closed for a period in the 90s and only really reopened in 2011. So the Cosmo was very much a whiskey of its time in trying to get people drinking whiskey again. We haven't been producing for about 20 years. So, okay, where can we get whiskey from? How do we blend it together to create a flavour profile that's essentially Japanese, but from all these different sources? So that's a really interesting case study in whiskey that was produced in terms of blends, sort of, developed 30, 40 years ago. Something that's in the past 10 years been brought to market and sort of introduced. We're then going to probably move on to the Nikka whiskey, the coffee grain, and we're now sticking with three whiskies from the Nikka house. Now, the coffee grain is made at the Miyajiko distillery, one of the distilleries set up by Matsutaka Takatsuru. And these coffee stills were actually imported from Scotland, so Scottish grade coffee stills. And coffee stills, unlike pot stills, used to really refine the spirit, get it to a really high alcohol percentage. So excellent for things like bulk spirit for grains, if you like Scottish single grains and that sort of thing. They stills actually make their gin and their vodka now as well. From about 2017, I think they've been playing around with that. So that's a really interesting sort of take on a old Scottish tradition done in Japan and done very, very well. Then we've got the two single malts we'll get into, so Miyajiko and Yoichi. Distilleries that have been around for a long time now. Yoichi, in fact, I think was 1934 when it opened. But in Japan, because there wasn't that history of swapping and buying spirit off other distillers, the distilleries really needed to do a lot by themselves. So even though they've got two distinct house styles, which we'll talk about, Miyajiko's on that more floral, arguably lighter side. Yoichi is a more robust, a little bit of smoke. According to some people, Yoichi can make up to 3,000 different types of spirit. You look at an Australian distillery that might do peated and unpeated, or a Scottish distillery that might do peated, heavily peated and unpeated, and those sorts of things. That's three. But Yoichi with its setup can do 3,000 different types of spirit. So it's going to be fascinating to see the history of why these distilleries were built and what sort of equipment they have, but then also those house styles that have been essentially developed and chosen within the range of spirits they can produce. So we're going to have some special guest or two of the tasting. We'll go through and taste these all in a line and really take our time with it and drill down. That's a quick little overview of what you get in this pack. And if you decide to open them before the tasting, hopefully that's a bit of a guide. But the tasting will be posted afterwards as well. So if you grab it afterwards or can't make it on the night, the full tasting kit will be there for you.